So I've just done a 4-part series about AJ Miller and his beliefs and my thoughts. The interview was done by this Mythbuster podcast team, and a few days after that interview, the two people, AJ Miller and the guy running that show, had a dispute. Came across this video, I found it quite interesting.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I spoke with a gentleman named Dean. Dean used to follow the teachings of this gentleman named AJ, whom we interviewed calling him Jesus. Why? Because he claimed to be Jesus. Me and my good friend David Samuel and Dr. Robert and Price wanted to have a great conversation with this gentleman because it is fascinating and interesting how people claim to be Messiah-type figures. Nobody has decided to become the gardener of Julius Caesar, or someone is the person who burns the dung at the local trash pile outside of Jerusalem.
No, actually I do. I claim to be a cave woman in my past life, and I think it was 23,000 years ago, and yeah, I had absolutely nothing. I didn't scrape poo or anything, but I didn't have a bed to live in. So yes, someone is claiming to be just a homeless person, but you don't know about me. I have written to you, I've tried, and I would love you to do an interview on me. I really would. And for your information, I believe that I did live in Jerusalem from the age of 12 till 26 when I died of a snake bite.
Everyone wants to be the leader, the Messiah, the ego of the leader type figure. And this gentleman, AJ, we call Jesus, is no different.
If you give me an interview, I will allow you to rate my ego based from 1 to 10. I don't give a shit what you say, but if you knew the truth about my life, you would realize that if I did have a big ego, I would not be calling myself Christ, because calling yourself Christ is actually just a way of making yourself a target to be humiliated, because everyone is just going to reject you, call you crazy, and you're going to end up living in isolation, miserable because of it. But facts are facts at the end of the day.
So my good friend David, who's bent over backwards trying to help them to make this interview possible, because we're interested in hearing how this guy claims to remember memories from the first century, and his wife is Mary Magdalene, and all these crazy details. His wife was supposedly raped by her father from ages 6 to 12. You name it, the level at which this gentleman is going to try and come up with this story. And he's not a dummy. He knows how to create these things. But I say that to say, David responded back with kindness. And here's the email of kindness. His response back was even more infuriated. You could see the energy coming through.
Basically, the interview that he did was about 3 hours long, and the majority of it is just AJ Miller giving his views, and the atheist, who is an atheist, is very open-minded, very rational. You know, the interview is great, I thought. But at the beginning, the atheist wanted to make his view clear about why he was doing this interview, and you know, he made it clear that he did not actually agree with AJ Miller, and I thought that was completely fair and fine, because he doesn't actually really express his views during the video. When I was editing the video, I left out the intro because I didn't really care about the atheist's belief, but I felt it was important for him to start the video off with his belief. You know, I always do the same. If I'm making a video against someone, I like to make an intro where I actually say that I'm making this not because I support their belief, but because I don't support their belief. AJ Miller did not like this, but I found that really aggravating and annoying, because I have been believing that I'm Christ and God for 11 years. I've been desperately trying to get people to respond, to talk to me, to give me any type of acknowledgement or, you know, interview in this kind of way, and I never get that. I don't know what's wrong. I think I'm in some sort of computer and people are programmed to ignore me, but I can't get anyone to do an interview with me. So I feel so cut off, and then AJ being argumentative a bit over him not liking his intro and stuff, and you know, making demands and stuff. I feel like that's really annoying, because I would have done anything to have some kind of interview like this, and I don't know what's wrong, but I can't get anyone to respond or take me seriously. I feel like this guy has chosen to make a video about AJ Miller because people, you know, worship Jesus and he's claiming to be Jesus, but when it comes to me, I'm claiming to be Christ and God, but I'm not claiming to be Jesus. Hence, I don't think that many people would take much of an interest in what I believe, because they don't give a shit. You know, I'm Eve. Who wants to know who Eve is? You know, they'll just say Christ is not a female, and then they wouldn't want to listen to me. So it's just really annoying how AJ had an opportunity that I would have loved and yet didn't appreciate it because he didn't like the views. I want to make it clear that if anyone wants to do an interview with me, I would have absolutely loved it right now, because for the last 11 years, I've been trying to get this and I can't get anyone to respond. I'm hoping that someone is going to come and get me soon. I'm waiting for a time where a group of people who know about me are going to help me, and as soon as that happens, well, I'm no longer going to want the help of the average person or the average person with a YouTube channel. But for 11 years I have tried my best to get interviews, and I can't get anyone to acknowledge my posts or comments or anything. Most Christians block me, and it's really frustrating. If you knew that I was Christ, you would just assume that I would be able to walk into a church and get these people to believe me, but that is not how it's been. So I need a team of people to help prove that I have been living in a world that just doesn't give a shit about me whilst claiming to know and care about me. Yeah, I need help getting these interviews because I can't get anyone to respond. The problem is the people I need help from are not responding to me, so I'm just stuck. But anyway, because of this argument that they had, this guy wanted to get a different side of the AJ Miller story, so tried to find someone else who knew him, perhaps knew him before he was calling himself Jesus, and he found this guy who was a sort of analyst, a spiritual consultant who seemed to know quite a lot about psychology and stuff. And I found this video very interesting because he does go into a lot of details about the psychology and AJ Miller. Now, I do believe AJ Miller was the Jesus of Nazareth, so I'm looking at things from both perspectives. One on the perspective that AJ Miller is right about some stuff, but he's also lying about some stuff. And I'm looking at this analyst who's, on one hand saying lots of truth because he's spotting that AJ is full of lies, but I'm also interested in how he's not able to believe that maybe this is the Jesus of the Nazareth, and maybe the Bible has actually made prophecies about him returning, but it's just not in the same way that Christians believe, because he's not actually Christ. I am. This guy who's doing the analysing of AJ Miller doesn't actually believe in Christ, hence he doesn't actually think prophecies are real, so he's blanking out that possibility. So I just want to analyse him and his views, basically.
True. And the guy I'm interviewing today named Dean, he used to follow the teachings. He met this guy. He stayed with this guy 5 days in a row, 24/7. So he has a little insight on this guy. And AJ ended up eventually shunning him from the community, creating lies. This is not uncommon amongst this guy. Some of you guys watching Mythvision and probably said, Derek, you crossed the line. I'm not willing to go. I can't believe you allowed this guy a platform. Well, I allow a lot of people a platform, but in particular, my motivation, intention, and whole goal was to show you guys how easy it is for anyone to claim to be Jesus.
If that's what your goal was, I don't think you achieved it, because AJ went into a lot of detail. I feel shocked at how much detail he can go into, and I'm confused as to how he's able to know this stuff. So I do see him as a liar, and I don't believe anything he says in regards to the sort of sixth dimension, heaven and stuff like this. But yeah, it didn't look easy, to be able to talk about yourself as if, you remember everything when you probably just remember tiny little bits. I feel like that's not something that you can do easily. So I think you failed at proving how easy it is to prove that you're Jesus when you're not. I think you saying what you just said there is more of an example of how hard it is to convince people that you are Jesus when you actually are. I do believe that is actually Jesus. Okay, it's not the Jesus of the Bible, because the people who wrote the Bible have taken his life and turned it into something else, but he states that, he knows that. I thought he gave quite a good story as to why the things in the Bible are not true. I think the thing that he got wrong was that he is believing that there is truth in the Bible, and then he's come up with some sort of religion because he feels it's his mission to preach some sort of religion. He's definitely wrong in those senses, but this is the real Jesus, and you have clearly not acknowledged or accepted that, even though I think some of his accounts of his life as Jesus are actually the truth, or they are actually visions that he's had. And so the fact that you've just looked at his lies and then just assumed that everything he's saying is lies, and stated how easy it is to just say that you're Jesus, don't think that is really what you've achieved at all, because it didn't look easy what he said. This extreme detail about this life that he believes he had, and what it has proved is how hard it is to convince people of something that did actually happen to you. To be fair, if he would have just talked about his past life and said that this was reincarnation, I think it would have been more believable. So if you don't believe because of the lies about, your spirit, and just all the nonsense about him talking to people in the spirit realm and stuff. If he hadn't have done all that, I think his story might have been a lot more convincing. But yeah, you can't be like, he's not Jesus, no, I'm smart, because you're not smart. That is Jesus. But Jesus is the Antichrist. The Antichrist is a liar. So yes, this is Jesus, the Antichrist.
And how those who are spiritually susceptible to ideas can easily be duped by guys like that and many other people, honestly. My intentions were never to have ill intent, though the claimants that follow this guy, AJ, think my intentions were evil or wrong or I had bad intentions. I was very kind during this interview. But if AJ wouldn't have responded in a way that made me feel like self-defense was necessary, I wouldn't have had the curiosity to probe into this guy's past and to find out more about who this AJ Miller is. Find out what's his life prior to claiming to be Jesus, or how did this cult develop? Where did it come from? So curiosity had me seeking this information, and I found Dean. And Dean is just one among many who have followed and known this guy.
AJ gets I spent 5 days with AJ in Dallas. He was renting a house, and that was back in 2008, I believe. He's talking about that he's Jesus. I'm like, skeptical, but I'm also a student of cults and charismatic group leaders, so it was fascinating to me. But I also am a spiritual guinea pig, so I'll try out anything. So I tried out what he was sharing, and it worked. And I was getting results. So when he came to Dallas, and this was pre-2012, he's talking about earth changes, which if you follow charismatic groups and cults, they frequently get into that, the catastrophe or disaster spirituality, apocalyptic, it's a genre. So that gets people's attention. And he was talking about earth changes, and people were preparing for all this. And I lived in Washington State at the time, and that was where the trigger event was supposed to occur, this big tidal wave, Mount Rainier erupting. And I'm thinking, okay, there's something to what he's saying. Let me, cover my bases.
I was 100% an atheist in 2012, but I do remember in 2012 there being a lot of sort of end-of-world preppers during that time. But it's interesting how I believed that I was God and Christ in June, July of 2013. And it almost feels like what people were preparing for was actually the awakening of, the real goddess on earth who's going to give birth to a new age. I was convinced in 2013 when I started seeing all the evidence that I was God and Christ. I thought that something was going to happen then, and I don't know why it didn't, but I noticed that there was a lot of end of world preppers the year before, and I felt like it actually had something to do with me. So, maybe it did, but maybe they just didn't realize that this wave was actually a spiritual wave that I was going to be sending out. In 2013, I started listening to lots of songs, and it felt like every song that I clicked on seemed to know about me and Martin and my feelings towards him, and it felt like they were all linking to these 3 days of time that I saw him, and they were linking to my daily life. And this is what made me believe that I was Christ, that it felt like some sort of tidal wave of spirit was coming on me and affecting the whole world, the whole timeline, and it was all leading to me and pointing to me. So it's interesting how you call it like a trigger event. This trigger event happened to me. So if he was prophesying that a trigger event was going to happen in 2013, I think it was pointing to me, even if he might have got the dates wrong and thought it was 2012. But yeah, the world didn't know this back then, and the world still doesn't know this, and this has still been happening to me, and I'm building up this spiritual, I don't know, whatever it is, this spiritual thing that's inside of me that's linking and forming the timeline. But yeah, you're going to know one day, and maybe you'll think that what he was predicting was actually pointing to me, but he didn't know me, so he was changing it into other things, like a tidal wave or something physical rather than something spiritual.
This was before all his, he said he was Jesus, but it wasn't like you see him now. He's a much more polished speaker. In fact, if you watch some of his early videos, he is not as, and some of them may not even be published, although he is really meticulous about getting his stuff out there.
think that's just what happens in life. The more you practice speaking, the better you get. The same would be said with me. I didn't even make videos in 2013. I believed that I was Christ. I was looking at what singers and celebrities were doing. I was convinced that they knew about me. I was convinced that they were writing songs and doing things about me. But I didn't know what to do because I didn't know who was doing it and how they found out about me and why they weren't talking to me. And so I just stayed silent for like a year, and then year became 2, and it was an awful, awful time because I basically couldn't move and I was lying on a bed, basically paralyzed throughout most of that time. And I was just shocked as to how they could just let me lie on a bed paralyzed, looking at all the stuff that they're doing about me, sort of posing up as me, and yet not helping me. I had a tiny studio flat, no money. It was a horrible situation for me, but there was nothing I could do because I didn't know who was doing it. It was only after that I start making videos, and that just stressed me out because everyone was preaching shit and lies and talking about me as if they knew me, but they didn't. And, over the time I'm making these videos, I'm getting better at talking. I'm a lot more confident in what I say. The visions that I had of me being Dada in 2013 were minimal, and over the years I guess I've built up not more of a story, but I've seen more visions, so I feel like I know who my sister was. I think she was Maya. I believe my mum was Sierra. I believe I know who the souls are now of who was in my family back then. My story is the same, but over the time I have built up more evidence and more things that back up my story, or things that expand my story and tell more about my story. And because I've had time to talk about it over and over again, I'm now much better at talking about things. And I guess AJ Miller has done a similar kind of thing because he believes that there's a bunch of people that have also come back. So he has a similar story to me. Like, he doesn't think it was only him who's come back. He thinks that there was a group of them who've all come back to kind of support each other. Only mine's a bit more impressive, and the people that I relate to are the singers and celebrities. Why? Because I'm God, and I'm going to be putting the people that link to me, I'm going to be putting them in positions of more authority and wealth and fame.
But some of the early stuff that I had, you would see him almost hiding behind his whiteboard, just really shy, and very humble about it all. But as these things go with these charismatic group leaders and cults, they don't start out, nobody starts out to start a cult. And just like nobody thinks they're joining a cult, but nobody also starts out to start a cult. Even Jim Jones started out as a very positive person. He was one of the first desegregated congregations in the country in the 60s and 70s. So he had lots of positive influences, but then he drank his own Kool-Aid, and then literally, well, he didn't drink the Kool-Aid, he shot himself. But the rest of it, they that's where the term comes from, drinking the Kool-Aid. But he started off with really positive things. And for me, AJ had a lot of positive things. And I told him I felt fortunate that I could use what he was teaching and help other people and use it on myself. But I wasn't burdened by the fact that I had to tell people I'm Jesus, because that is something he is stuck on, is that he insists on being honest and upfront. So he has to tell you he's Jesus rather than just ignoring that. And what I would suggest to you after listening to the interview is, if you subtracted the I'm Jesus, you would actually have so much in common with him as far as the way he views the New Testament, how all that was created, that it's myth, it's stuff that people. Oh, yeah. You have a whole lot in common with him. And if you knew his some of the other emotional stuff, it wouldn't put you off. You would think, I can get something out of this, and that's how I approached it.
So you believed he might have actually been that, or you never thought that to begin with?
So if you just look at the Christian story, it was very plausible for me at the time, and there was some irony to it, which is my personal experience of how the divine works. Doesn't work like I think it should, or although I did believe in reincarnation at the time, because it was really the only way to solve to have a logical theodicy, and theodicy is the problem of evil. How can you address that? How can you have an all good God and we've still got evil? And reincarnation solves that issue.
I'm just showing those clips. He does speak and speak and speak and speak. So I've taken out quite a lot of the stuff that he's saying, but I'm giving you an idea of what he kind of believes. He's a sort of spiritualist. He believes or believed in reincarnation. I understand reincarnation because that explains where evil comes from. It's just development of the souls and souls making better choices over time. I like how this guy is approaching things. I mean, I've seen so much worse out there, so it's a bit of a relief to see someone being a bit more open-minded to different theologies. Yes.
For how people get away with stuff, etc. But AJ suggested that there is no reincarnation and that you just continue on. And he uses Robert James Lee's Through the Mist as his framework and cosmology. So it's classical spiritualist cosmology. And he just kind of reinvented that in his practice. So it seemed like it would be very ironic that if Jesus was to come back, he would come back to some Jehovah's Witness in Australia. Because again, all of Christendom technically is expecting that. If that's part of your worldview, then why not?
So I just this is interesting because a lot of the comments on the video were saying the same thing. They were kind of in the same vein, and they were talking as like, why doesn't he know how to speak Aramaic? And of course, there's always an excuse or a reason why, even though he's supposedly speaking to spirits on demand, like they can't recite 2 sentences in Aramaic to him, and he couldn't just say. So I mean, obviously, if I'm going to be critical, and I want to be critical, I could dissect what he's saying and show, in my opinion, why he doesn't really have the things he's saying he has. Anyone can touch bases on these spiritual concepts and ideas and principles. Anyone. All it takes is you having somewhat of a messianic complex or some ego about you to run with the whole idea, or maybe even have false memories, some delusional thinking that might have taken place, something there that might have played a part. Because I've spoken to someone else and they said, like he started having these false memories and ideas, but that weren't initially that he was Jesus. There was some satanic ritual stuff that was taking place with his ex-wife's best friend and him, and all this strange stuff that was going on. So I wonder if there's mental health issues going on, and someone like you, me, who works in the mental health area, and I know that mental health is a huge thing with addiction and stuff like that. I wonder if this guy is either playing a game here, in some sense he's conning people and whatnot, with the fact of using legit principles that work in a pragmatic way for most people, or he's delusional and believes these things sincerely, and he's out here teaching these things. Does that make sense?
Is not a unusual thing for people to think they're Jesus. In fact, I have a current client who thinks he is Jesus, and he had an experience. I think he was using psychedelics, but he believed he was Jesus. And so I am a spiritualist. I never thought I would be a spiritualist, but I am. And a spiritualist cosmology certainly explains all this, including people who do psychedelics, and that spirit can, and in fact, I've had similar experiences myself. So that you have this influence, and they make you think you are whoever. You could be the number of women who were supposedly think they were Mary Magdalene in a past life is, well, it's impossible. But they think that. So they're tapping in either to the collective unconscious.
That's actually an interesting point. Other than this Mary, I've not heard anyone else talk about themselves being Mary in a past life. So I find it strange how you're saying that, you'll find countless, unlimited amount of them, when I don't think you will, really. I mean, I haven't seen it. I feel like, though, it's something you will tell yourself if you don't want to believe someone. This person thinks they're Jesus. Oh, there's millions of these people, they're everywhere. And it's just like, no, they're not. You do know that, right? I've had people say, oh, there's loads of people that say they're God. And it's just like, no, they don't. They actually say Jesus, and then you can't get any information or evidence from them, that they're not the same as me. When I went into the mental home in 2013, when I first started believing I was God, I did meet someone in there that also thought they were God, but it also seemed like in a day or two's time, they'll change their mind and they'll say something different. So, there is a difference between someone claiming to be God on like a long-term serious note and someone who's claiming to be sort of Jesus just on a, I'm going to believe this week because it's the truth. And then if you ask them in a week's time, they'll be like, I didn't say that. There's a difference between these two types of people. So would you say the same thing about me? Oh, there's countless people like me that think they're Eve reincarnated. Although you have to admit, if you're doing counselling to people and someone is coming to counselling because they want help and then they're also saying that they're taking drugs and then they think they're Jesus, that is a very different scenario to someone who isn't coming to you for help but rather is trying to help others and having this big story. You're acting like he is just one of many, many people, but I haven't actually seen many, many people do this. It is a hard thing to lie, and to lie so confidently and to lie so much as well. Like, I do think he has created some sort of delusion when it comes to the spiritual side of things, but you actually believe the spiritual side of things. You think that he's being possessed by spirits in a way. So, to me, that side of the belief is more crazy than the idea that he is Jesus. I believe in reincarnation, so Jesus is going to be somewhere, providing the story was based on a real person. But I don't actually believe that spirits can possess people for like a long period of time. I do believe in spirit possessions, but I think it's last 10 seconds. I've had a spiritual experience with that Jewish person who I believe was running away from the Nazis, but that lasted about 7 seconds or something. That's what a spiritual possession is. A spiritual possession isn't, someone believing something for 10 years and constantly preaching the same story, or the same story that gets bigger and bigger over time because they learn more things about their past life. This is not an example of a spiritual possession. Him thinking that it's not a past life and that this is not reincarnation, that it's the same person just in a continuation, that feels a bit crazy. But so does the idea of him being possessed by someone or influenced by spirits. One could say that that's just as crazy.
Or they are, as AJ would say, they have these emotions stuck inside them and they're attracting these spirits and they are impressing these thoughts on them.
Is it possible, and I just want to probe the naturalist point of view in a sense on this, because is it possible that reading a narrative that you've been taught from youth has played a role to where you've almost now become part of that narrative, and that's why they're creating and concocting this continued idea? You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I'm not an expert with that, but my personal experience with that whole spiritual realm, and I absolutely have firsthand experience, and some of the stuff that AJ said and told me actually happened to me later. So I knew he knew what he was talking about. As he is, some people are very naturally mediumistic. They can connect with that spiritual realm, and a lot of people, as I tell skeptics, is they try to measure the spiritual with the tools of physical science. Mm-hmm. It's not possible. It's just not possible. So, but it doesn't mean that that's not there. Just because I can't do something doesn't mean it can't be done. So my former partner, she was very mediumistic and she could tap into that realm. She was probably the most humble person about it. She always questioned herself, but she could totally tap into that realm and get messages, hear stuff. I think there's other things that
Do you even know what the spiritual realm is? Because I feel like you're trying to explain it, but you don't even know what you're explaining. I feel like I do hear voices in my head, but I don't believe that I'm hearing them from spirits. I believe that I'm hearing it from my higher self. I have been connecting with films and TV and just a huge number of things that link to me, and the things I watch on TV link to my daily life. So it's almost like all these different things that are all made throughout time all seem to know that I'm going to, on this day, watch that film or watch this YouTube video, and they kind of link to each other based on what I'm saying in my head. So it's very, very complicated, but it's real. So I feel like my higher self is basically God and is linking with other people, and if other people are hearing a voice, it's likely that they're hearing the same voice that is me, because they are made in my image and they are feeling the same spirit. They're getting the same message in the same person. But I don't see it as many spirits. I think there are many spirits, and that experience that I had on that cliff between Germany and Switzerland, when I had a possession of a person's life, a person who was escaping from the Jews, it lasted about 7 seconds. It was a spiritual experience because I felt like I was experiencing someone else's life. But yeah, that person isn't going to be telling me that I'm Jesus when I'm not. You're trying to say that AJ Miller has come up with some sort of belief because he's being led and misguided by spirits. But do you know who I think the spirit that he's actually listening to? I think he is listening to my higher self. I feel like my higher self is guiding him and telling him that he is Jesus. But he can't really fully hear anything else. I hear the voice because it's myself, and I get confused. I had a dream that I was Aaliyah and I died in a plane crash. But I didn't focus on the plane crash. I focused on all the things that she did in her life. I had like a flashback of just some things that she was doing. And I felt like the dream was telling me that I was going to be a singer. I was going to be famous. And, I understood it in a completely different way to how I should have understood it, which was actually that I was famous, that I was that girl. I just didn't realize that. And so I feel like in that same way, a lot of people are getting messages. And it's not from spirits, but it's from God. And they are just not able to understand it. And I feel like AJ Miller has received some messages and some visions that have told him that he's Jesus, and then he's gone out to try and tell people this, and people haven't believed. So he's just tried to delve into his story, build up the story. Maybe the spirit, the voices that is coming from my higher self, which is God, has given him these visions and these beliefs. Only that doesn't mean that these visions and beliefs are the truth. Yes, I have a spirit that lies, and it lies for a reason, because it's trying to set up something really big. So in a way you're right, because I feel like he is following a spirit, but I would say that this spirit is actually the spirit of God, and you haven't really acknowledged that. You're wanting or preferring the idea of the fact that he's being led, that are lying to him, that are telling him not the truth. And I don't believe that's the truth. I think he is getting the spirit of truth, but I think he's not understanding it or hearing it properly, because he doesn't realize that, yes, he's Jesus, but Jesus is not Christ. I know he's from the Seventh-day Adventists, and my spirit would have probably guided him into that path, because they don't believe that Jesus is divine. I mean, I don't actually know what they believe. I never knew that until now. That was the spirit trying to tell him that yes, he's Jesus, but no, he's not divine. And I think the spirit wants him to set up some sort of religion and some sort of belief. I don't think it's the truth, no. But if you knew my spirit, you would know that my spirit actually has hidden agendas and a plan, which, okay, cult leaders do end up in some sort of big suicide plan. But yes, I am God, and I cannot manage 8 billion people. I cannot raise 8 billion souls. So we are setting up this massive worldwide occult suicide plot. Yes, you would see that as disastrously terrible, but you're not going to see it that way if you were one of the few that get saved. You're going to be like, well, I'm so glad that our planet is not being destroyed by billions of people that God cannot look after. There's all this confusion, there's all this mental illness. A lot of people are tapping into the spiritual realm, but I feel like the spiritual realm is actually connected to me, it's connected to God, it's connected to my truth, and they're getting some things right and some things wrong. But if they're getting some things wrong, there's a reason for it, and that reason could be to lead them to heaven. We're calling it heaven. That's my version of the rapture, to lead them to heaven. But yes, which side you're going to play, I don't know. That really depends on, well, it depends on how you feel about me and the truth that I'm saying. But I like listening to your video because I myself don't really know that much about the spiritual realm, but I feel like this video is actually helping me. So maybe it's helping me for a reason. I understand that I said at the beginning of that, I thought you were crazy to think that he's been guided by spirits, and now I actually realize that I have actually just said that he is being guided by spirits, but it's the Holy Spirit that he's been guided by. So yeah, I've learned something, and I do believe it's the truth. The Holy Spirit is a creepy and unpredictable spirit, because that is what the true meaning of holy means.
I don't want to make this about you and me. Of course, this is about AJ and trying to figure out more about like why you're no longer part of it and all that kind of stuff. I'm interested in knowing. But for me, it's like I know some people who hear voices. They believe they're talking to spirits. They go see a mental health specialist, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, obviously you're suffering from this particular diagnosis." However, I will say this: as a naturalist, someone who does think there's probably a natural explanation for all of these things, even if we don't have the answers for some of these things. I've had experiences myself. However, I now attribute that to the mind. And I think that there's probably a natural explanation within the pineal gland or some type of experience. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but what I would say is, especially my clients with substance abuse issues, when I start talking to them about some of this stuff, in fact, I use the film Crazy Wise for a class, and these guys are tapping into that spiritual realm. They're tapping into a very low level. And yes, you may have assaulted your brain with drugs or alcohol, but that opens you up or makes that space between the physical and the spiritual very thin, and it comes through more easily. So if you've been up however many days on meth, you are very open to hearing those voices. In fact, I have.
Is that a hallucination? I mean, or is that a spiritual? Do you have to attribute it to a spiritual thing, or could it be hallucination?
When it comes to this topic, I find it interesting, definitely, and I like the fact that you're both very open-minded and generally want to know the truth about this. You know, I do hear voices. I have never taken drugs in my life. Drinking does not make these voices any clearer. In fact, if anything, I hear them less, or I'm less open to hearing them. But I've never taken drugs. But I feel like the voices that I hear, they come when I watch things, when my memory's triggered, and when I feel like I'm just getting visions and stuff. I do want to point out, though, you said that hearing these spiritual voices is being on a low level. I don't think you can say that. You know, I think you should say it depends on what you're hearing. If you're hearing voices that are saying to go kill yourself, well, it's not like it's on a low level. It's just it's saying something that you shouldn't do. You know, it shouldn't be about whether or not you hear something or not. It should be about what you're hearing, what you're saying, what you're seeing, how you're going to respond to it, what you're going to do, and what is the alternative motive behind it. There are a few people that call themselves Jesus. I have not found that many, to be honest. Most of the ones that I've found are dead. I have found a few others, but I feel like they're promoting their idea of Jesus because they like this sort of idea of being looked up to and worshipped by people. I don't sense that with AJ. Like, I feel like he does like a bit of attention, we all do, but I feel like he's not doing it because he wants to be worshipped. Whereas some actually sit on a throne and, you know, do actually admire this sort of ego of being worshipped. I would call that actually a lower level, but I would call it a lower level because it's not important. You know, if you're saying that you've met a few people who've taken drugs and are calling themselves Jesus, but then a month later just admit that it was all just, you know, them going through a bad patch, you know, that I would say perhaps is an example of a low level because it didn't amount to anything, it didn't go anywhere. But yeah, if someone's been doing it for 10 years and has actually, you know, managed to get their videos and interviews and stuff, this isn't a low level. You know, this person has got more fame than you have. I'm going to remember AJ for a long time, and I've known about him since 2013. I don't really know you that much. I think you are thinking a bit more clearer than he is. And I think you're more intrigued to, you know, find the answers, where I feel like he thinks his role is to form the answers. But it's true, he has just formed the wrong answers. Oh well. But you all have a different role. You know, his role is to promote himself as being this Jesus of Nazareth and to promote a bunch of lies with it. Your role, I guess, is to question him and to judge him and to decide for yourself what you think is true. And you're helping me too, because you're helping me think about the spiritual side. And I'm not actually a spiritual person. Even though I'm God, I wouldn't say that I'm a spiritual person. I'm a realistic person. I want to look at evidence. I want to look at facts. If something is real, I want to see proof of it. And that is how I know it's real. But for me to have this proof and this evidence, you know, I need the spirit to help me. And it helps me by doing things, by influencing people. And I feel like the spirit influencing AJ is part of this. You know, I believe that Jesus of Nazareth was actually a real person, you know, and I believe that because of AJ. Now, if I didn't believe in AJ, I might have not said that. You know, I don't believe that Abraham or Moses was real. Why? Because I don't know who these people are. Okay, I do think that Eminem wrote Leviticus, hence he's probably the closest figure to Moses, as I read somewhere that Leviticus was written by Moses, but I don't think that was the truth. But was he stuck up on that hill writing those things? No, I don't think he was. You know, I see that as a fictional story, and I haven't seen him do anything that kind of links to Moses, so therefore I'd rather see him as a fictional character. But with AJ, I have seen things that I believe is true, because when I listen to his stories, I feel like I do get some visions of things that he went through, and it just sounds believable to me. And it sounded believable to you too when you first heard it. I have known about AJ Miller, and I have believed that he was the sort of the real Jesus of Nazareth, but I felt not inspired to talk about him or to bring him up, because I haven't felt a need to. But now that I realise that I've been ignored for such a long time, I need time to heal. I want to do some interviews where people don't know about me, you know. I feel like this would be a good time to use him, use what he's gone through, and use him as a test to the world. You know, here is the Jesus of Nazareth, full of lies and shit, but what do you think? And then, oh yeah, here's Christ, I'm Christ. I think also people are less likely going to kill me if they think there's loads of Jesus. And so all these low-level people that call themselves Jesuses, you know, in a way it's helping me a little bit, because if people see me as just another Jesus, they're going to not want to attack me. If they think there's millions of people like me that are all saying the same thing, you know, I'm actually in a safer position and people are less likely going to kill me. And so maybe all these other Jesuses, I don't really know who they are, but maybe all these other Jesuses are popping up, so that if I came up and said that I'm Christ, you know, people would be more like, yeah, maybe not, but I'm not going to kill her. Why? Because I wouldn't kill the local crazy person calling themselves Jesus, so why would I kill her, you know? It helps me in one sense, but it also doesn't help me on one sense, because, you know, there's positive and negative in everything, and the negative side is that people aren't going to believe me, you know. Oh, there's always Jesuses out there, you're just another Jesus, you know, I'm not going to believe you. And yeah, this has allowed me to be persecuted and rejected. This is probably how it's so easy to hide, because so too many people are just thinking the same way as you are. There's loads of them, you know. So on one hand it kind of helps me, because it makes people think I'm not going to kill you, because if people did start thinking I was, you know, the real Jesus Christ or something, you know, they would actually think that I was the Antichrist and they'd want to kill me. But if there's loads of these sort of Antichrist figures, they're just going to be like, yeah, there's loads of them, whatever. Even if the truth is that there isn't actually loads of them. But because they think, yeah, there's loads of them, it means that when the real one comes, they don't believe her, and then she ends up going through the persecution and the sort of rejection and the isolation because of it, which I don't want, so that's a negative thing. But yeah, when the celebrities get involved and start promoting me and I go through a fake sacrifice, if this even happens, you know, then it'll probably, well, then it won't matter. But I feel like they do have these fake Jesuses, you know, that they can play a small part in this. Are they doing it to help me? No, I don't believe that. I think they're doing it just to help themselves or something, because they want some sort of something different in their life. They want to believe that they're special, but I don't believe AJ Miller is doing it for that reason only. I'm just analysing psychology here. There's lots of different reasons to why someone does something, but there's also a spiritual reason, or a psychological reason, or maybe they're just mentally ill. There's loads of reasons. But I think it would be unfair to say that AJ Miller is mentally unstable or unwell, because he's not. This isn't a mental illness. Mental illness is where people's minds change and they can't stick to one story. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I think it's happening for a reason, and I feel like everyone has a different path. So you shouldn't just insult someone's path even if it doesn't make sense to you, because maybe it does make sense in the bigger plan or the bigger scheme of things. You just don't know what that bigger plan is or what that bigger scheme is. You know, you can't say these spirits are demonic and evil if you don't know why they're doing what they're doing. You know, okay, I think my spirit is setting up some big wide rapture, which is actually just convincing people to go into heaven, but it's doing that because it can't manage 8 billion people on Earth. 8 billion people are killing this planet. So even though it's demonic and it's evil, it's actually doing a good thing for the people that it's going to save when there's less people on the world.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is, because you're a spiritualist, and I'm not trying to poke at you being a spiritualist at all. I may not agree with you on these things. That's okay. What I'm trying to get at, I guess, is it seems that someone with AJ's message who are saying the things he's saying, and they're tapping into that same vein that you and other people who are very spiritual minded are tapping into. It's easy for, in my opinion, this is just coming from me, maybe I'd love to get your insight on this. It's easy for someone like him, coming with a very kind, loving message, to tap into the same vein and then package it with I'm Jesus or I'm Mary or I'm some bona fide messianic figure from history, Buddha, you name it, and get these followers who are like, look, I sense and feel the same things he's talking about. So I guess that question is kind of turned to say you're no longer following AJ, even though you believed in a lot of things prior to you meeting him, and you still believe a lot of things
I was never following AJ.
Okay.
In fact, when I was around, I would say I was kind of the second group of people around him. He tends to shed people over time, but I do know the people who were around him first and spent lots of time with him and actually saw him develop. At one point, excuse me, one of those people told me AJ wrote an email to this group and was going to tell people he was wrong, that he is in fact not Jesus, except for one of the group in Barbados, and I'm forgetting his name, he's on my LinkedIn, encouraged him not to do that. They wanted him to be Jesus and the Messiah. So AJ he didn't ever send that email. So at some point he realized that wasn't true for himself.
I think it'd be a bit foolish to think that because someone has had, a sort of change in mind, that it's therefore proof that it's not the truth. I have believed that I am Christ and God since 2013. Now, because I've had no backing, no support, no one siding with me, no one agreeing with me, it is incredibly hard to keep up a belief, even though you are slapped with so much evidence and you see the evidence mounting up and mounting up. If you're not getting any support, if you're not getting any backing, it's so hard to stick to that belief, because you look around and you think, well, my life is shit, everything's going wrong. If I was God and Christ and people's telling of God and Christ is true, why is nothing good happening in my life? And therefore I've gone through this constant bombardment of yes I am, no I'm not, yes I am, no I'm not. And it's actually the Spirit that keeps telling me that I am, because I keep thinking things, turning on the TV and feeling almost like they've just answered the question that's in my head. Things like this happen all the time, and I can't be around people because every time I'm around people, I'm not supported. They tell me that it's not true, or they just seem uninterested, or they just walk away, or they just blank out what I say and forget what I say, and people are not supporting me in any way. But every time I go on the line, I see evidence, like not every time I go online, but every day I see evidence. And if I talk and post things online, I feel like I start having a conversation. And at the beginning, though, I wasn't posting things online. I didn't realize that I could actually demonstrate this power that I had. I was seeing it all the time. People were linking and saying things that reminded me of the conversations that I had with Martin. And I was just like, did you know that he said that? And then they would say something else. Did you know he said that too? And it was almost like they were reading some of the things in my head and answering it, but they didn't hear what was in my head. And it was a very, very strange thing. And I couldn't prove what was happening because I couldn't put a tape recorder inside my head and prove that I was thinking things different to what they were saying. But somehow their next sentence would link to what I was just thinking. I couldn't demonstrate what was happening, but it was happening. And even though it was happening all the time, it was also so easy just to forget about it and just say, I've got no evidence, I've got no proof, no one's supporting me, so I'm going to stop believing this because this is going to drive me insane. And even though you're going through yes I am, and then the next week you're like, I'm going to forget it, no I'm not, and then I'll see more evidence and be like, yes I am. And I've gone through this for years. I've gone through this, and it's awful, and it's better when I'm alone and isolated, because I'm not filled with doubt and people that don't believe. And just because he went through a patch where he was, I'm going to give this up, people are not supporting me. He didn't do that because you said he got some support, and maybe the Spirit got these people to support him and to encourage him. Maybe he's getting followers, maybe he's getting support because the Spirit actually wants him to believe what he believes, and therefore people around are paying him and giving him money and saying, we think that there's something to this, and maybe there is something to it. And I can't say this with every case, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are raising money for some charity that doesn't actually exist, and I'm pretty sure there's a ton of people that are not spiritually connected to this, but I feel spiritually connected to AJ, hence why I'm making this video and why I'm bothering, because I feel like he's probably gone through a similar thing to me, only he is actually getting a little bit of support. I am not getting any support from anything other than the spirit and from just all the singers and celebrities and films, and just, well, I feel like I'm getting a lot of support from everything, but not in an actual physical they're talking to me way. It's they're talking to me through the TV and through the online and stuff, and they're talking to me through time and space. It's horrible. It's really, really horrible, and AJ's not going to feel that, but if he only felt people not supporting him, then he probably will just be like, you know what, I'm just going to give up. But they didn't do that, and therefore he's kept his belief up. And in a way, it's nice to feel like I'm not the only person that's having difficulty or will understand how hard it is to try and prove to people that something is real when you don't actually have physical proof. I do have physical proof, but I can't get anyone to watch my videos, I can't get anyone to respond to me, I can't get anyone to talk to me, hence I can't give them physical proof because they don't want to watch or listen or anything, and it's so hard. And I'm sure he can understand this. There's a lot of people that can have a conversation with him and still they just don't want to believe. They would rather see it as a mental illness, even though he's not actually displaying mental illness qualities. The power of the spirit is not just in one person, but it's in a group. So if a group is supporting him, then even if he has his doubts, that doesn't mean that he's wrong just because he had his days of doubts.
But with regards to the spiritual stuff, it's easy to fake, right?
Mhm.
My telling of what the spirit is not easy to fake. Why? Because I believe the spirit is getting people to do things and it's linking them to my daily life, and I just need to find a way of proving it, which is, well, I found a way of proving it by going onto Facebook and posting what I was thinking, posting what I was seeing, and then watching other videos and saying, oh look, what a coincidence. It's just, that's how I've done it. I think I've actually done it with the names of the singers. I believe they've all got a hidden name, and therefore if you listen to one song or 10 songs, that hidden name is going to be the same. So if you listen to one song, even if you haven't heard any of their songs, you don't know what else they've done, you can't remember, but you listen to one song, you hear a name and you type it, and then you go and listen to all the other songs and you'll be like, oh look, they have the same name, and you show how that song relates to that same name. I felt like that was the best way to prove that I am hearing voices, although I'm only hearing just the names of the singers, but it's still a voice, right? But yeah, with AJ's telling of the spiritual, I think he had come up with a sort of an incorrect version of what the spirit realm is, and that is just to say like, yeah, I've spoken to Abraham all the time. Oh, and Moses, yeah, he's my best mate. We go out drinking in our spiritual realm all the time. That's easy to fake. Why? Because you're just saying nonsense. That's not actually what the spiritual realm is. The spiritual realm is, I don't know, but it's people doing things that link to my daily life, and that's my telling of the spiritual realm, the physical version of the spiritual realm. How I'm doing it, how it's happening, I don't actually know. I can't tell you that part. I can just show you that it's happening and try and show you proof.
Very easy to fake. So I am skeptical with most people. And the difference between someone, as I think it was Jung said, the difference between the mystic and the madman is the mystic is swimming in the same waters the madman is drowning in.
There might be truth to that, but how I see it is that the mystic is understanding and coping with what is happening to her. I'm pretty certain that if any human on the planet went through just 3 weeks of what I went through, they'd be jumping off a building because they would be like, what the fuck is going on? I'm living in some sort of computer. How is everything linking to me? Why is my life so shit? Why are people not helping me? They would just go mad, and they would be drowning in the same sort of, they'd be drowning with everything they see. If they saw what I was seeing, they would be drowning, not swimming. I feel like I'm swimming. Why? Because I feel like I've done this plenty of times. I have no idea why it's 11 years. There are definitely days where I definitely feel like I'm drowning because I cannot cope with how long this has been and how long you've kept me waiting. I have not been ignored for 11 years before, so this is far worse than anything I've ever done before. But yeah, I feel like I'm swimming not because I'm insane or surrounded by false evidence. No, it's because I'm just experienced at what I do. I'm a very old god. I'm not a new one.
So you're interfacing with some of the same materials, but it's overwhelming for some one person. And most people who hear voices, I think it's 80% of them, find them to be helpful. There's other people that I would suggest tap into this very low level, and it's not helpful. And they're getting, as I call it, the play-by-play, and they're being told all the negative things about them. They're being told exactly what they're doing. I'm drinking this water. They're making fun of you. And when I talk to clients about this, they know exactly what that is because they've experienced it, especially with meth, a very dirty drug. They're attracting very low-level influence. But for most people, they see that as their angels, their guides, and it's helpful. So
when it comes to the spirits, and the voices, I'm very, very skeptical. I have watched loads of Christian videos, and there are plenty of people out there that believe that they're guided by the Holy Spirit and that the Holy Spirit is leading them to Jesus. And to me, it just feels like whatever they're following is actually just leading them into a suicide cult or a suicide belief. And they think that it's helpful. They think that, they're being guided by truth. There's so many Christians that do believe that they have some sort of voice in their head and that it's Jesus talking to them. And it's not. And it's not coming from me. And I don't know what it's coming from. It's coming from their own imagination. And therefore, I don't know what you're really referring to right now, because there might be some people that are hearing voices, such as make Buffy the Vampire Slayer, make Sabrina the Teenage Witch, make Rainbow Bright. There's probably people that are hearing these voices and are getting guided and inspired to do things and create things that are actually doing stuff. But yeah, when it comes to people hearing voices that tell them, drink this, eat that, try that, I don't think they're listening to my spirit, because my spirit links to me. I feel like my spirit gets people to do things that link to me. Now, if you've created films or music or, things that go on TV, things that, actually achieve, actually do, actually create, actually have a result, then I feel like that could be a voice that links to me. But yeah, if you're talking about voices where people are, inspired to drink health drinks or inspired to not eat mushrooms because they cause cancer or something like this, I don't think that they're actually hearing spirits. So yeah, you've got to be careful when you say that people are hearing spirits, because I don't think a lot of them are. Okay, this video is getting really long. I'm going to go to London till Thursday, so I might make a part 2 to this, but it won't be till Friday.